So today, all I'm doing is helping facilitate with Mentimeter questions. And we have a really fun question before we begin this session. I really liked how we had a really strong ending with the statement that we have to accept fire. We have to accept the smoke. What kind of smoke are we going to accept? That was really awesome. And in that same vein, what do you believe are barriers to welcoming fire back to the land? So that's really the question to start off this panel with. Please go to menti.com on your phone, on your computer, type in 9717-1674. Wow, look at you guys. Fear of the unknown, fear of being large and out of control, knowledge of cultural burning and practices, federal and state red tape. Oh, I don't know if that color is red, but okay, I understand what you're saying. Fear and disrespect, liability. That's right. All of these are some barriers. Feel free, this is 20 responses. I know there's a few more out of you in there. May have some more responses. Built up fuels, yes. A lot of different reasons that there are barriers to welcoming fire back to the land. A lot of answers we're hearing are about fear and misconception, even going to the place of lack of knowledge and disrespect. So thank you for your words. I am handing this off to the wonderful Nikki Cooley. I cannot wait to hear what's going to happen now.
Thank you, Melody. Those are some really great answers to the question of what barriers. So keep sharing. We'd love to hear some more. So make sure you interact with us. And you've heard me from the last 2 days introducing myself. So I'm going to do a really brief one. Again, Nikki Cooley. I am of the Dene Nation, and I am one of the co-managers of ITEP's Tribes and Climate Change Program, along with my co-manager, Karen Cazzetto, who is based out of Boulder, Colorado. And just a really quick overview of the session. So the session, we're going to give folks a chance to introduce themselves, but then also talk about kind of what the work that they do through some questions that I'll ask them. And so I'm really excited that I'm kind of I've been fangirling the past few days, but especially today, I've heard from so many great knowledge holders, and this session is going to have some people, actually all of the folks that are on here are kind of people I highly respect for the work that they do. I hope you guys learn something and have something to take away from this really important conversation about overcoming barriers to, in my words, welcoming fire back to the land. It's kind of one of the vocabulary I use. Someone once said that you have to change how you speak to speak about fire and the environment and whatnot. So but with that, I just wanted to introduce the first speaker who he's going to introduce himself, but I have really close ties because we were in forestry school together at Northern Arizona University, the School of Forestry, and we had a cohort of probably the largest Native American cohort. Maybe someone else beat us out, but it was a really fun time, and I'm really pleased to introduce my friend and colleague, John Galvan. Would you mind introducing yourself, and then we can move on to the next person?
Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for the intro. I'd like to start out with my traditional language of opening up with a prayer for everyone. You can join me. tao mukit pa onjo tani kutai no data huita kulao yanda alashma data otomo en eta te majonas da o ho sama jo ku kan take ku kwala la o be funda fa funda shi fa funda na ge is pe de tons in da ge wi ge ta ge to ke ko na na o na zin dan take zin dan po sha zin tam o zin no shin de mu da bo wa kyu ma sha no da tam te da ki pe la ku ne tan kwala na na ta o se te ku pe shi ma sha pe don ki ku kwala na na be lo ke te le. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Again, thanks for joining me. My prayer was our Towa language. It's my first language. Coming from the Pueblo of Jemez. Again, as Nikki stated, my name's John Gavon. I'm the tribal forester for Pueblo of Jemez. My background as the tribal forester, I've been a tribal forester since I left NEU. While back, but I served in several different capacities at the tribal level. Again, where my current duties, I work with government-to-government relationships on how we can proceed forward running the forestry program / fire program. But I served in leadership positions as well too, as a second lieutenant, first lieutenant governors these last couple of years. And again, as the we have a small scale operation. I managed that for several years as well and served as an interim director. That's where I'm coming from this morning. So thanks for joining me this morning. My short introduction.
Oh, yeah, John, I know we'll hear from you more, and I'm excited to hear what you've been up to, what else you've been up to. With that, can we move on to Jerry? Do you mind introducing yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Jerry Classe. I'm with the Fort Apache Agency in White River, Arizona. So I'm the acting fire management officer there for the BIA. The organization that I run is a large organization. It's one of the largest BIA organizations in the country, with a total of 60 or 70 employees that I manage, and we do everything from prescribed burning to controlling wildfire to mechanical treatments, crew thinning, all these different treatments that we do here on the reservation, that we are highly involved in here. We treat, I think on average about 20,000 acres a year, and that's just prescribed burning. That doesn't include mechanical treatment or crew thinning. I've been with the BIA for about 20 years now. I finished my 401 series back in 2016. Before that, I was just on the hotshot crew, on the Habitat crew, and then the regular fields crew. So I bounced all around these different crews here with the local agency until I, they paid for me to go back to school. So I went back to school, and then so it got me to the position that I am now. So now I'm the acting fire management officer for Fort Apache. Thank you.
Yeah, Jerry, as someone who was on an engine crew for one summer, I love how humble you are about saying that you were just a hot shot. You guys are on the front line. So I'm going to brag for you there. With that, thank you, Jerry. And then with that, Mary, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Mary Huffman. I'm happy to be honored to participate with our distinguished panelists who have a wonderful connection to people, land, and fire. I came up in fire through the Nature Conservancy, who's my employer, and we always burn for plants, animals, and natural communities. And we still are not super strong in fire suppression, but we feel that our joy and humility in putting fire on the land at least helps us keep our ears open to the needs of Native peoples who are revitalizing their traditional fire cultures. My current post is director of the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network. And again, I'm happy to be with you. Thank you.
Mary, welcome. Thank you. And the fourth panelist that we have here is Melvin Hunter Jr. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, Melvin Hunter Jr. I'm the forest manager for the Hualapai Tribe, which I'm also a tribal member. I've been here just about 2 years, and prior to that, I spent nearly 15 years with Indian Affairs, which I definitely enjoyed my career there and learned quite a bit about fire management and prescribed burning. We're a small unit. We're just developing 2 years. Forestry isn't new, but the Wildland Fire Management Program is, and I'll talk about that later on in the presentations. But good to meet you, and I'm glad to be here, Nikki.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And Melvin is also an alumni of the forestry program at NAU. And then just because I went there, I'm kind of bragging about us. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to point out there's a lot of folks that don't realize that the Hualapai have trees on their land or forested areas, or that they do fire management on their land. So I'm really excited to hear more from you. So now we're going to start a series of, talks from our knowledge holders. And please remember to contribute to the discussion, ask some questions, and we'll get to those at the end towards the end when everyone's done. But I want to pass it over to John. You mentioned how the tribe cannot do its work without fire. I think it was in reference to what the tribe is doing to take care of the land and whatnot, because we had that conversation. As I pull up your slides, I wanted to see if you could speak about what your community has been doing to take care of the land, including the tribe's timber sawmill, and how you've been using prescribed fire to care for the land. John?
Thank you, Nikki. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Again, thank you for bringing in my pair. I just wanted to show some slides again to guide me through some of the questions. As you see the Pueblo Jemez logo again, Walatowa is the place that we currently live, but where my prayers led this morning was to pray to our ancestors again, that we come together again, that we're talking about ancestral lands that are living right now. So I just wanted to display this one. You can go to the next slide. Next slide.
Oh, did it come up? Okay.
Okay.
There it is. All right.
Again, for some of you that don't really know where Jemez is located at, there's a lot of participants. We're northwest of Albuquerque, again, within this geographic location. Next slide. As I open up my prayers, it was our Towa language, and again, this last 3 days, there's been a lot of cultural burning. I just wanted to include our brothers and sisters that are neighboring to where we currently exist. Again, our Towa language, these are some of the languages that we hear around here in New Mexico. I just wanted to display that. Next slide. Again, Walatowa, as you see down below, is currently where we reside after we got displaced from the Spaniards, again, in Pueblo revolts and other things. But we have not forgotten about the locations up in the higher elevations that are managed by federal agencies or in private lands again. So I just wanted to show that we have large villages. There's a lot of small field houses that exist. They have place names. These are cultural sites or spiritual sites that we are near to and pray to. So praying to the ancestors. These were occupied then, and they're still living. I just wanted to note that they're still alive and living, and we pilgrimage and we still pray to them. Next slide. Again, just to show some of the concentrations of archaeological sites. There's some big sites that we saw in the previous email slide, and some of the field houses that occupy the Jemez Mountains within the Santa Fe National Forest. We just kind of drew a line around the watershed. You can see a little bit of the red boundary of where we currently reside on the reservations that are determined acreage, but we never forgot about the ancestral lands of the footprint. Next slide. Again, here's just a the foreground. We have springs, we have cultural sites, religious sites there that are spiritually visited. And the background is Redondo Mountain. That's located within the Valles Caldera National Preserve. It displays an image of the eagle that's on our symbol. I wanted to show that it's really a cultural significant landscape here. Next. And just to show some of the historical kind of things that we were known for, the black and white pottery, the ancestral sites. You can see down below, education to our tribal members, the younger generation, is what we're leaving and preparing for. Again, what do we do at that? These sites are really a being that they're still alive, that we pray to them, we revisit them. Again, this is our ancestral lands that we're talking about. So we need to protect these and include wildfire as part of the protection. Next one. Here, this is 1920s, 40s, where we currently reside. It's called Walatowa. Again, I'll show you a current picture. That's how it used to be, where our current village, where we reside right now, of 3,900 tribal members. So again, it's totally different, modernized right now. But next. Again, just the next slide will show you where we reside at right now. So again, just the boundaries that where we exist, the red is the trust lands, but then we want to focus on the ancestral lands where the yellow border is at. And Valles Caldera National Preserve under NPS is the white section. Next. Again, we currently reside in our Pueblo Jemez, the Walatowa, it's called, down below, and as you can see in the background, that's the Santa Fe National Forest, and to the north we'll have the higher elevation, again, Redondo, and the larger landscape. But this is where we're talking about how fire, or either how we utilize fire currently as agrarian society. We count a lot on farming. Currently, right now, is preparation time, so we're preparing to burn weeds and other things that we will have to prepare for a good crop, as you see here. And this is what we're doing currently. But again, we haven't forgotten about the ancestral lands. Again, how we utilize fire and how we utilize them to prepare our fields. Again, I just want to throw that out there. Once we would get onto the higher elevation, that fire is unique and sacred. Next. Again, currently we have a forestry program that's running good. These are our tribal members. There's one non-tribal member, so we want to diversify again. Again, it's been great working from higher elevation mixed conifers down to our lower bosque again. So we, excuse me, we encounter several ecosystems that we're fortunate that we want to work in and really to expand. We're thinners right now. I have another outfit that does the logging again, so we're thinning and trying to reduce that, but yet we're preparing to move forward. Again, we're not a cultural program yet right now for fire. It's been great to hear some panelists that there is hope again, and that's what we're moving forward as a new program to get into fire, so we can begin our own fire program. Next. And this was just a recent one. I think some of the collaboration or either the barriers that we had on burning on tribal lands was difficult. We have our crew that is our firefighters. And again, I think I want to change my wording of their firefighters. They put fire on the ground, but I like earlier panelists what he used as cultural burners. So we want to move in that direction. This is one of the collaborations that I like to bring in, where the barriers were that we've entered into some agreements with other NGOs or either with our adjacent federal agencies, again, some kind of mechanisms to work on these ancestral lands. This is going a recent project last couple of weeks ago, where we assisted their crews to burn in a WUI interface, again, for the protection of their domestic water system. And again, all the other benefits that were related to fire. So this is just an example that we did recently. Next. And again, one of the weird things that we're fortunate to have a small scale sawmill operation. This isn't best of the picture right there, but yes, you can see the rough cut lumber. We have some a circular sawmill. We're utilizing 100% the wood material that is generated out in the field. It's operated through the Jemez Community Development Corporation as a business, but we coordinate a lot of the projects that are ongoing on ancestral lands or either on tribal lands to sustain this operation here. And again, it's been great to have this as another entity where we can utilize this material. It's been existent. It's gone through its kind of bumps and kind of hurdles and stuff, but I think we're in a good location of having this timber industries to where it's really thriving again, and want to continue to move more into it as we utilize more material from the forest. Next. Some of the things that we're doing, and again, some of the ecological benefits that we move into as restoring some of the forests. I just wanted to display some of the key points or elements on why we're protecting and doing what we're doing from forestry, to include fire again for the cultural uses that we have. In the background, you'll see the Douglas fir is really a cultural use species in the Southwest, and really the grasses, they're not grasses, they're medicinal. Of course, the diversity of plant and animal species. Next slide. Again, some of the larger landscape. Again, we are near and dear to the cultural landscape that we are tied to, and we haven't forgot about those sites at all. We've had the opportunity to work with some academia to where they've studied the Jemez Mountains under the recent Jemez fire and in resilient ecosystems. It's a publication that came out where the evidence was determined that really there was a WUI utilized how we used the wood, and we did some small scale burning again. So based on their research, it was evident that we have been using fire in landscapes for a long time, and that's what we're gearing towards to moving into. Next slide. I believe that's the last slide. So as so our logo, the last barrier that I had, I think we've had several. We work closely with the BIA, but at times there's some constraints due to some turnover, either the funding again it's not there at times, but we've made some small steps to where we've made an agreement where we can start utilizing fire on the ground using our own crew, but we don't have the resources. We need the higher qualifications of burn balls and others that we don't have. So we're making small steps. But earlier, as I heard from Margot, that it can happen, and they're a living program there. So I want to move in that direction. We're not getting forestry and fire is a combination, and we just have this larger landscape that we is managed by federal agencies. So you have to collaborate with the federal agencies again to make a lot of the stuff work again, whether it's for putting fire in the ground or utilizing some of the material to sustain our operations. Again, and this fire, again, as Native Americans, it's sacred. I think we need to recognize the benefits. If we use fire in a way, it's a living, breathing thing. We pray to it. We talk to it, and really, again, up to right now in the village, fire is being used again, no matter how hot it is. So it's sacred to us. Yeah, this I think if I've answered your question, I believe as far as the Walatowa timber industries, that's been a positive thing to have. Again, as we move forward, we'd like to expand more on those opportunities in any which way that we could probably utilize some of the materials. That concludes my presentation for now.
Thank you, John. And can you remind us what is the acreage that the tribe has?
Yeah. Yes. Again, I think I have brought this up. Jerry had they're talking about large landscape at Apache. We're looking at 89,000 acres on tribal trust lands that's determined, but yet it's not stopping us. We have borders that we don't see again. So we're looking at the ancestral lands of the Santa Fe National Forest that are called Jemez Mountains. So we're talking about 1 million acres plus.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, John. That was really interesting. And I appreciate your prayer. I saw you on a webinar that the Southwest Fire Science Consortium and others hosted, and you and Chris did the same thing, and I really appreciate that. And Ron Good is giving a shout out, and he says we always start our burns with ceremonial workshop. Our spirituality always comes first, and that's something that I also grew up with, and it's nice. And I started out with having everybody introduce themselves because, being trained in the Western way and then growing up how I did, I grew up the same way Carletta Chief did, no running water, no electricity. That didn't matter. It was what our spirituality and our traditional practices that really was the important thing. And so I feel funny when I come into a space where we just kind of start talking about data, we start talking about without really getting down to who is in the room. And we always, and through our prayers, we actually recognize the non-human relatives, should I say. So I really appreciate that, John. So thank you, Ron, for that comment. Also, with that, I'm going to move over to Jerry. I really had a fun time talking with you about the Fort Apache Agency, and which is one of the largest fire agencies. And you mentioned the number of prescribed burns you all do each year. And you talked a little bit about that in your introduction, and you can talk a little bit more about it. But I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit about how you have seen fire take care of the land and why it's important to continue this practice.
I can definitely do that. So just being being on the BI for a number of years, we've been prescribed burning, or I've been on there 20 years, so I've been prescribed burning that whole time. So we've been, and even prior to me starting, they've been doing it for years. So it is a large organization. We do a lot of prescribed burning, and it's done a lot of good here on the reservation. It's a way to just introduce fire back into the landscape, which we took away from, a long time ago when we started fighting fires, when we started putting these fires out. So it's just a safer way. I want to say, well, kind of a safer way to put fire back down. There's still some dangers there putting fire down, but it's more a little bit of a controlled environment, like you know, we do it in the fall or in the spring, you know, when it's not as hot and not as dry out. You know, what I've come to realize, you know, just from the, you know, we have 1.6 million acres here. We have about 700,000 acres of ponderosa pine. You know, I think that's the largest ponderosa pine forest, you know, I think in the States. But over the years, just from working here, what I have seen is like there's 3 treatments out there that I've seen that, you know, being successful with treating the land. You know, you got prescribed burning, you got crew thinning, and then logging. You know, most people don't think that that's a type of a treatment also. And those are from what because we do have a timber company here also, and they log. You know, so you put those 3 together, you know, and it does build a healthy forest from what I've seen. You know, there are some kind of restraints, you know, with like before I got on, they're talking about smoke. You know, when somebody mentioned smoke, my thought is when I see smoke, there's some good comments under of when they do see smoke, and then, but when I see smoke, you know, what concerns me is the color. You know, that's just being firefighter for all these years. You know, I'll look at the color of the smoke, honestly, and then that can tell you pretty much what would be burning out there. You know, so just as a firefighter, that's what I'll look at. And smoke is one of our when we do a lot of prescribed burning. You know, that's a lot of the concern here with the people here. So it kind of will slow down or hinder operations at times. You know, start to get political, but you know, from like a lot of our rural areas, you know, we're getting all these homes that are, you know, being built out in the forest. You know, so we try to treat along a lot of these communities here. You know, and so that's what some of our main focus is on, is treating around the communities around here. And you know, and it's done a lot of good to, you know, just especially when fire season comes around. You know, we just help protect the communities that we have. And then, you know, the reservation boundaries, like Pine Top Shoal area, you know, and those are large towns, you know, and then so we focus a lot over the years. We focus a lot of our projects on these rural areas, you know, and you know what John mentioned earlier is funding. You know, that's another aspect that plays into kind of would limit some of our operations at times. You know, but there's a lot of stuff that will come in with when you put fire down to the ground. You know, it's a lot of stuff has to come together in order for it to get it just right. You know, and to treat a lot of acres like that. You know, like I said, we do have a large organization. You know, we'll get 3 burns going a day sometime. You know, anywhere from each burn will be 300 to 500 acres a day. So we get multiple burns going a day. We'll burn for at least 2 months, or 45 days is our burn window. You know, is when we can accomplish a lot. You know, during that time. So I don't know if you have anything else.
No, that was great. I mean, yes, I do. You mentioned that you're the reservation borders Pine Top and Sholo. And do you find that there's do you work with those non-tribal communities during your burns?
No, most of our burn organization is tribal members and bordering reservation, like St. Carlos, or even like Hualapai there where Melvin's at. You know, we'll have folks come down, but a lot of them are tribal members that we don't necessarily work with the Forest Service. The one thing we would really do is just make sure we're in communication with them and let them know that, okay, if we're burning near the reservation line, you know, they definitely need to know, and vice versa. If they're burning towards our reservation line, they need to inform us. So there's that that's going on in the background. So we have to make all these connections, especially with these large communities that are just outside the reservation. And if we're putting fire down, and that's what really draws a lot of attention. And so we just got to make sure that all the information's out there to everybody, not just to Forest Service or whatever forest that we're boundarying, but just to the general public as well. You know. So it's challenging.
It's challenging. Yeah, definitely. I can only imagine. And but yeah, I was really impressed of how much your agency does. And I want to get back to a question later on. But so thank you for that. I just want to mention to all of you that are listening, the title is Overcoming Barriers to Getting Fire Back on the Land, or Welcoming Fire. I mean, there are many barriers: political, bureaucratic, local, historical, you name it. And the views of why, point of views of, you know, why, how, and when they happened, and why these barriers, some of them are still in place. You know, we can talk all day long about those, but the speakers that we have on this panel are giving us examples of what they are doing despite those barriers, despite a lot of us, all of us, that meaning Indigenous people, the tribal communities, are not all on their tribal lands. We're kind of restricted to within those boundary lines that the federal government drew for us. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that these folks are really giving examples, good examples of on the ground work that they are doing to care for the land using fire. And I love, Jerry, what you said, that a lot of people don't realize when they see a truckload of wood or logs going through town, they're like, oh, they're clear cutting again, or they're taking away healthy trees. But when in fact, you know, they may have cut down, you know, trees that weren't as healthy or that needed to go, but it's a form of treatment. And so I think, you know, that type of education is really, really important. So thank you for mentioning that. With that, I want to move on to Mary, who works with the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how you and the organization are working with Indigenous communities to, you know, help facilitate the process of, you know, working with the people to welcome fire back to the land.
Thank you, Nikki, and thanks to our other speakers. You know, as a non-Indigenous person, it's always a really heartfelt journey to try to be an ally. And some of the barriers I want to talk about toward the end of my remarks have to do with personal barriers. But the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network started in 2015 when our director of a series of fire learning networks that have been going since 2002, our director said to me, you know, Mary, I wonder if what the Nature Conservancy has been learning about fire partnerships makes any sense at all in a tribal context. And it was her perception, her name was Lynn Decker. It was her perception that the policy language in the Forest Service in particular was starting to open to a little bit more receptivity to tribal perspective. And that was in the planning rule and revision of fire plans and, excuse me, forest plans and so on. And so a teammate of mine named Jeremy Bailey and I sat down with some of the panelists in the event this week. Frank Lake was there, Margot Robbins was there. And they said, you know, we would take a chance on exploring this because our tribal cultures among the Hupa, the Yurok, and the Karuk peoples are similar. And we don't know if this sort of thing would work. And so I wanted to honor their contributions in this. But it wasn't too long before sitting around at the table and just sort of starting to listen. I had a conversation, this would have been in a subsequent gathering. I had a conversation with some of the Yurok and Hupa people in particular. And I said, well, how did you used to take care of this landscape with fire? And they said, oh, well, we used to burn along family lines. And I said, oh, well, why don't we do that? And so I think it was not only, I mean, it was an easy thing for me to say, right? Why don't we just do that? But the depth of the history, the depth of the sort of, fire oppression that had been prominent there, and other barriers, I think made people think that that was just a huge leap. And to have a non-Indigenous person say, yeah, let's negotiate that big leap, I think was important. For a white person to say, well, of course you know what you're talking about. Of course your people have been in relationship with fire since time immemorial. Of course, of course, of course, I think that was a first step. I also would say that through some, some years of mentoring since then, that I realized that, well, this is something that the wife of a cultural fire practitioner, and I think really a ceremonial fire leader, said to me once. She said, this is a woman named Lisa Hillman. She said, Mary, we don't do Indian light. We don't do Indian light. So somebody like me has to accept that I'm an immigrant. My people did not evolve here. I don't have a particular place in my bones, in my very DNA, that tells me how to relate to the land. And so I have to accept my own role as someone who can support other people's journey in revitalization of their fire cultures. So in practice, what does that look like? How would the Nature Conservancy, and me as the first director of this network, I hope my successor will probably be an Indigenous person, I would hope, someday. But if a community that we're trying to support says, we need to be burning on the second Tuesday of the such and such a month, when the such and signals such and such tell us it's time to burn, I don't need to know their sacred stuff. I don't even need to know why they want to burn then. All I need to do is say, how can I help you make that happen? How can I help you make that happen? It's revitalization of your culture in your way by the people you think are the right people to do it, to be doing the work when and how it needs to be done. And so I think those sort of foundational messages have been really influential in the growth of the network. And every now and then I say something stupid or do something out of line, and I'm asking, these mentors, and I invoke Margot's name. Margot would say, Mary, you're going about this the right way, because the minute you start to push, Native people are going to back away. And so it's about listening, it's about patience, and it's honestly about followership. And I say these things to the white people in the convening here, because we tend to be vocal. We tend to think that our job is to figure everything out, and then to convince other people to get on board with us. And that's not the way this works. That's the way this backfires. And so I think respecting the reality that we will never be Indigenous people on this continent, unless you are an Indigenous person, and that our ties to the dominant fire culture are also a barrier, and that trust is hard to earn, easy to lose. But given the horrific genocidal and other atrocious histories of white people with tribal people in this country, we may not even know where to start in building that trust. And we have to look to others to help us earn that trust. And I recall a gentleman who's the Natural Resources Director of the Klamath Tribes in Southern Oregon. He's part of the network. And he said, trust, heck, we don't know whom to trust. We'll just start with goodwill. Let's just start with goodwill. Small steps. So I don't mean to be overly emotional about all of this, but I do think just every now and then it's helpful for a white person to say, what are the barriers that supporting Indigenous peoples, what barriers might present themselves to a non-Indigenous person who wants to be an ally, and on behalf of an organization that is growing in its commitment to Indigenous people. So let me just offer a couple resources for those of us who are non-Indigenous, and that is, if you intend to build a partnership with Indigenous peoples, first thing is study the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Put it under your pillow, read it over and over, and you'll pretty soon get some really good clues on how you ought to go about your own work. And then I think you just have to be willing to go on a journey where you start to grapple with your own privilege. It's a painful process. You never realized you were quite so stupid. You never realized you were quite so unaware. And honestly, that is a classic symptom of somebody in privilege. You don't know what that privilege even is. You don't even know what privilege creates in you. And so you have to be willing to tear down some of that in your own self-concept and talk less, listen more. So I'll stop there.
Mary, yeah, I think you've said some really important things that we all need to hear, whether we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, is to be humble and be willing to listen. I really like that. We had a great conversation, and I think you also touched a little bit on that intergenerational learning, and I think that's in the process. And Frank mentioned it and showed a wonderful slide with him and his son in the previous session about that intergenerational learning. And so I really appreciate everything you've done. And but I want to go back to some of your comments later, but thank you for the advice. It was kind of like a mic drop. So is that how you do all your presentations, Mary? You just do a mic drop at the end?
No, I'll make myself one more step vulnerable. I lost a brother a few years ago, and in my prayers to figure out how in the heck I could make sense of that, the message I got back was speak from the heart. Work from the heart. And so suddenly today, I think it was after John's prayer and his courage in speaking up about spirituality and relationships and fire made me want to just sort of like, I don't know what, be a little more present. So thanks, John.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. I'll circle back around in a little bit with the little time we have. I'd like to give some to Melvin. So I know you have some slides to share with us. So while you're pulling up your screen, I can, brag about NAU's forestry program again or something. Just kidding. I was really in our discussion, well, it was by email, but still you talked a lot about how your fuels management program, I know you have a number of roles that you do for the tribe, but I was fascinated about how you're trying to really encourage tribal members to be part of the process, and hire them, educate them, and empower them in that process. So if you could talk a little bit about your tribe's fuel management program and how all that comes into play.
Sure, you bet. I'll start this PowerPoint and go from there. And one thing I wanted to add, on the education component, I do sit on NAU School of Forestry's advisory board and the chair of the subcommittee for Native American recruitment and retention. So there's a really strong group and some folks with a wide range of experience, but these are just, some of the links to help move students and get development within, the Hualapai Tribe. And then also board member of NAU Alumni Association. So just a general presentation here, and I'll give you the location and who we are, our mission and goal, and then specifics for the fuels program, and then employee development. The Hualapai Reservation is located in Northwest Arizona, and the light green here is woodland vegetation, pinyon juniper, the rest is grassland. And if you were to travel down Buckendale Road, hit Route 66, Peach Springs is the center, is where the forestry office is, and the main tribal chambers. It's actually the main community, or the capital, if you want to call it. And then as you go up Indian 18, this is the forest here, 54,000 acres of ponderosa pine, intermixed with pinyon juniper. And those red polygons are the compartments. So it's set up on stand structure. And then our neighbors, To the north is the Park Service. The northeast is the Hualapai Tribe. And then the south and western is private BLM. So that's where we are. And the forestry program was contracted sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, 638. The fuels reduction program was contracted. I still don't have the exact date, but it was in the mid 90s. And then as of February 2020, we contracted the wildland fire management program. So the tribe's already been doing the implementation part, and now we're transitioning employees to be red carded, and I'll get there with the development. The mission of the Hualapai Tribal Forestry and Wildland Fire Management Program is to promote personnel through experience and education to understand the disciplines of the Forestry and Wildland Fire Management Programs and to adapt traditional knowledge to sustain natural resources for the Hualapai people. The goal is to focus on employee development, providing staff experience, training, and education to prepare the individual a career path within the Forestry and Wildland Fire Management Program or other. And that other part is, I think, at least my neighbors here, they get comfortable here in Peach Springs, and I just like to see them be able to be at the point where they can compete nationally. They can go do forestry in Germany if they'd like. But that's the kind of prep that we want to provide. The fuels reduction program, coming in and having to write a new position description, wrote a PD. This is really a perk to our program. It's written as a crew member, so that crew member spends time in fuels, will spend time in forest development, timber, GIS, and then wildland fire management preparedness and suppression. So that just gives us a leverage to not only give the experience by converting them, or at least nearly making them full-time employees, but they appreciate the other disciplines and they're aware of it. I think one thing I see constantly is, there's the biggest tree. It's the, let's go follow it and everyone's going to watch because look at what I did. And that's not the perspective we want to have. We want to let folks know this all matters. We're in a sense farmers, but ours is over hundreds of years. So that will tie that back into the mission of understanding the discipline. And then we provide training in-house. For example, this year we did 80 hours. That included radio communications, GIS, GPS use, knowing datums, formats, medical, radio communications. So we want to make sure in an S212 proper chainsaw training, but provide them all the tools so they're safe, they're competent, and if we do have an emergency in the field or wherever it may be on the reservation, they have those points of contact so they can expedite. Project implementation, that bottom right photo there, that's just before, or actually you're just merging with the Ponderosa Pine, but that's a field break there that was started in 2020. A lot of the guys will spend a majority of their time on forested acres and likely 20% in woodland. And on the left there is just an example of some of the training. Just recently we had, myself and two other guys went to work on qualification or update quals. And those quals are important because as we manage any type, or as we manipulate a fuel, and I really like how Jerry's perspective, we remove it through a harvest, we remove it as biomass, we remove it as we remove it and it becomes slashed on the ground, but all that downwoody debris still has to be managed. So it's critical for us to maintain NWCG qualifications so we can build the cohort here and implement our own projects, prescribed burn projects. Here, the other programs here is suppression. The bottom, as of 2020 February, we had a successful season. We had around a little over 9,000 acres. Black Canyon was one of the largest fires, about 8,000 acres. But with the staff here, the militia, with not having, the fire management program being so new, we were able to red card folks and respond. And it's really a big success for us, in Indian Affairs, Western region supporting us logistically was huge, a big contributor to our success, but we were able to manage all of our fires. A couple 1,000 acres is type 4. And then our prescribed burning, as mentioned, we did some broadcasts, our pile burning, and we do have broadcast burns on the menu for this year. And monitoring. This is something that we started last season, but we got to, continue it. These are all factors that are going to improve the program, but you can see, there's only really a handful of us that are working with the network, about 21 individuals, and that competency and retainment of what we teach them, and then being current with times is the other point. As things change, technology changes, we just got to be up with the current time. I don't know who's still using a clipboard, measuring tape and things like that, and carrying a camera and a GPS, but we want to get away from all that. Employee development, the NAU School of Forestry, it's 2.5 hours east of Peach Springs. There's other schools of forestry, but it's critical. We are 638 contractors, so we still have OPM's requirements for the positions. If you want to be a fire management officer here at Hualapai, it requires a task force leader, ICT3 or RXB2. I have probably 20 years of my career, but I have enough time to start working on these things with folks and getting them developed. I often tell my staff that at the end of the day, if there's not that depth, or I'm not taking vacations at least a month out of the year, then the depth's probably going to be shallow. As mentioned, NWCG qualifications, that's for the suppression and prescribed burning. There's opportunity for the 401 certificates, fire ecology management, and then NASP. I don't know too many folks that are silviculturists in the fuel side, but I think it could be a component. I mean, they do a lot of the treatment on the ground. It's definitely heavy in forestry, forest development, and timber. And just to mention, there's a couple of guys there. Those plates there with the Clado and matchsticks. Miss Deanne Schulman was one of the first women jumpers. She came up and talked to the crew and gave us a challenge to form nearly a 20-man crew. I think we have another year left, but we're 3/4 of the way there. But these guys, men and women, they're 80% of the employees are tribal members. They're all between the age of 21 and 32. So there is plenty of room to develop. It's just time that we're challenged with. And then in conclusion, what we're doing isn't unique. It's not uncommon. A lot of the agencies do that. They move militia left and right. I think for me as a tribal member, is that just the investment in the local folks, is heavy. And if I can help, give them or push them towards or use the program to move them towards a higher education, give them a career path. I think that individual, once they go home, it'll start running within their household and start moving throughout our community. We do have a lovely community, but there's always room to change things and develop more and see the production increase. So there's nothing we couldn't get past, right? One thing that was mentioned earlier was the barriers. I think returning fire to the landscape, one of our targets here is 4,000 acres prescribed burn on the forest, 2,000 acres in the woodland. And I think it's likely, I'm optimistic. I think we'll start turning the corner in 3 to 5 years with our staff and their experience and education. But there's really no doubt, I think if Hualapai, if we're not successful here, it's just within our own community. We just haven't been reached or quite understood where we want to be. But everyone's hearing the mission now, and we want to get there. So, thank you.
Right. Thank you. That was really interesting about how I really liked what you said at the end, like local investment in the local community members is one way that you are trying to help your tribe. And that you also said that working for your tribe would sustain the program and invest in the local. And that's what you're doing. You're kind of walking the talk, so to speak. So we have a few minutes left before we release everyone for a lunch break, but I wanted to there's a question from Frank Lake. I'm scrolling through, which is why I'm looking to the side here. And this can go for anyone. I think he said, you know, he's a federal researcher. He searches for tribal fire management and cultural burn examples. Indigenous knowledge, or TEK, is often not specifically mentioned as a factor that informed the strategies. Is this changing, or is there more recognition of tribal cultural values for burning in your plans? I don't know. You can raise your hand or just go ahead and talk if you see that changing with, in your own work.
The Hualapai means people, the tall pine, and it is ponderosa pine. And we're fairly young. I liked John's image of this mill. We're getting our first portable mill, but with that, one of the, with talking with the ancestors, they do. I'm sorry, not the ancestors, but our elderly. They do want to see more forest products. And on the other hand, as a manager, I think that is I feel that that's my job to sustain the forest, just for that simpleness of, people, the tall pine. And that's, I don't know too much of history, but that's what really talks about who we are.
Thanks, Melvin. John or Jury, do you have any input into that? Or Mary, I don't know if you've seen that in any of your work of recognizing traditional knowledge in burn plans or fire management plans?
I think one thing that, you're talking about barriers here. I think one of our biggest barriers here at Fort Apache is just educating, our tribal folks, or, just people in general, and Melvin mentioned elders, elders, and with us here, that it's that education that they need, and we do have some elders that are against putting fire down in the landscape, so that's one of our barriers, is just trying to educate people on that. And that's, we do have a sacred mountain here on the Fort Apache reservation, but we can't burn on that mountain, but from looking at it from a manager's standpoint, that forest needs to be treated. There's a lot of deading down, a lot of bug kill, and if we just continue leaving it, and and it's just a recipe for disaster. The fire, the mountain's just going to burn, and it's going to burn hot, and it's going to nuke everything out. So I think for us is trying to get that education out there to everyone, so that way, because fire is not all bad. It's not. It does a lot of good, and then so that's the tough part here on Fort Apache, because we do a lot of burning, but there's certain areas that we're not allowed to go burn at, for that reason. So thank you.
I think from me, I haven't much experience in putting burn plans and other things, but we're still under the BIA, so everything's followed to the BIA rules and regulations. So I don't think we've had any interaction to incorporate any of the indigenous values or knowledge that we like to, but we still like to. But once we get there, I think that will be important to include in there. And as Jerry was saying, and the rest of the panelists, yeah, the traditional knowledge is really important, and sometimes we want to hold some of that knowledge to ourselves, to our tribal members. So I think it's critical that we're forming this our cultural burning program somehow, so we can retain that knowledge to ourselves again.
Thank you, John. I hope we can come back together in a year, a couple years or something, and for you to say, okay, we actually incorporated traditional knowledge heavily into our burn plan or a burn plan that we created. I'm just dreaming big here for you, and I hope that that happens more often too. Mary, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, a small thing, one of the methods that the Nature Conservancy and these fire partnerships really use in getting good fire on the ground, getting training accomplished, and building local partnerships is these training events we call training exchanges. And some of you have heard the acronym TREX events. And those are where people get together, they learn together, and they burn together, sometimes 10 days, 2 weeks at a time. And I do think that in the area of the Karuk tribe's ancestral lands, and also in Yurok territory, the leaders of those training exchanges will add cultural objectives into the daily plan. I forget what those are called, incident actions, IAPs of every day and every work shift. So that's fairly straightforward to do, but at least it calls out that there are Indigenous values that are driving why people are burning and how they're going about it.
That's great. Thank you. We have about 3 minutes left, and there's so many great questions, but I may send these to you by email, and then I don't know if you can answer them, so I can send them or put it in the chat box, or what do you call that? The discussion board for SWAF and whatnot. So I got to one question, and there's so many good questions out there, but I think they would take longer than we have. But I wanted to give time to the panelists to say, if you wanted to share one last thing or say one last thing about, I don't know, resilience or adaptation, or why the work that you do is important, or I don't know what you want to say. I know Mary did her mic drop, but I don't know if the rest of you also want to do your own mic drops and kind of encourage the rest of us to ensure that, you know, we got to keep going. So I know that was really broad, but
I'd like to add to that, as I stated in my landscape pictures again, there's the difference again where we're currently reside now and where we came from again in our ancestral sites of the forests again. We haven't forgot about those. They're still living. We still have a good relationship with Forest Service to visit those. It's just one thing that some things that really restrict us at times, but we need those protected. And who better to have our own tribal members that have the ancestral footprint up there to work on those. You know, we have our tribal trust lands that we have to work on, but it's important to work with our adjacent land agencies again to work those other areas, and how important it is for us to keep maintaining and utilize fire and just the benefits it has once you start to learn what fire can do again. That's kind of my take on that one.
The barrier, to restoring fire and using fire as its tool, whether it's caused by man-made burn plan or taking advantage of a natural condition from lightning, it's all realistic. I think those barriers, what I've learned as an Indian Affairs employee and now a tribal employee, we do have opportunity on federal lands that they don't have. I guess I should say that because it's still a trust acre, but the opportunity, it's there, and it's just a matter of relationship building and knowing the policy, updating policy, and keeping it current. But to have that buy-in early and maintain that momentum and move forward and start working on those policy changes is huge, and that's the point when it's going to happen. It'll always be a conversation until it's written down and the stakeholders are invested in. But I agree, as a tribal member and all the tribes out there, it's huge, to not invest in your local community. You want to see things change in your community, and it can start with your program within your household, and I think it's huge. And I just like to see for Hualapai at least more and more of that. It matters to me. the community matters and where we're headed in self-determination matters. We know the eras of Indian affair or the government, termination, self-determination. It's not guaranteed that, public law 93-638 may be forever. So just, consider some of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvin. That very, very well said. Jerry, do you have any final words you want to share with us, or no pressure?
No, I got cut off there, but I lost. I'm not sure what you guys are currently talking about.
Well, we're just talking about, just final words that we wanted to share about why fire is important, and we should keep and respecting it. I know it's a big question. It's okay. Do you want to say anything? Otherwise, I'll shut it down. I mean, close it down, not shut you down.
No, I'm sorry. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I just want to thank you so much, John, Mary, Melvin, and Jerry, for joining us today, and also I don't know. I work in the climate change world, but I have that background in forestry and fire. And I just want to close out with some words that I learned from my Cherokee elders. I'm not Cherokee, but I spent some time with them on why and how they used fire to take care of the land. And the beloved elder Jerry Wolf, who mentored me when I lived in North Carolina for a while. And he always said this to me. I'm not quoting him specifically, but he always said, you really have to work with your families and with your loved ones to really take care of fire, to use fire to take care of the land. Without that, we are not Cherokee, we are not Navajo, we are not Apache, we're not, Jemez Pueblo. I just thought that was so powerful, that guided me in my master's thesis work. So I just want to say thank you again. Really appreciate your time. Thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'm going to release you for lunch, a snack, but join us for the next panel, because it's all about me. No, it's not actually. No, my good friend Althea is going to be doing that panel. So stay tuned, and thank you again for a wonderful panel, and we'll talk to you soon.